I'm Ray Cullum, and I'm a member of the Marion Bermuda Race Organizing Committee. And it's my pleasure to have Mark Riley here with us today to talk about how he approached the Marion Bermuda Race as a family patriarch. And Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about the boat and yourself, about what you've done in racing, which is significant, and then we'll get into a nice conversation and learn a little bit more about a family approach.
Okay, well, my name is Mark Riley. I've been racing extensively since I was a teenager and participated in the Marion Bermuda Race and the Newport Bermuda Race about 18 times, mostly when I was younger, but started to do it again in the last few years. And the opportunity came up to charter a boat that would have been perfect to take the family sailing on. So we exercised the charter. It was a FAR 63 that was designed to sail around the world solo. And we saw that as a great opportunity to get my kids and extended family on the boat to do the Bermuda Race.
Yeah, and you did it very well. You won line honors that year with everyone, taking home the governor's trophy, which is terrific. But you know, you just don't put your family on a boat. There has to be a lot that leads up to that. So, what were some? I know you have some very talented, children that sail. But how did you lead up to putting the whole family and extended family on a boat?
I guess where it started is I started to do a lot of work with Mass Maritime and sailing with the kids from the school and helping the offshore team. And I had sailed on this boat in particular a couple of times. And it was a boat that you could very easily, in moderate weather, sail by yourself. In bad weather, it surprised me that somebody was going to sail around the world by themselves in it, because it was quite a boat.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I had my son especially, who was very, very interested in sailing from the time he was 9 or 10 years old. And he came to age as a teenager, and we saw it as a great opportunity to be able to put it together to take sailing for him and for us as a family to the next level. So in fact, he was actually our skipper on the race, my teenage son, and I was navigator, but it wasn't just a token thing that was done. He actually did all the inspections. He prepared all the safety equipment. He did everything on the checklist. And anybody who's done it for their first time realizes that's quite an endeavor to do.
That is. Yes.
And he did that as a teenager with myself backing him up. And fortunately, the club provides a great service of walking people through that. So we actually had a lot of people that we personally knew that were coming down to the boat, so it made that process very friendly and very easy. But he did all that himself.
Wow.
He was there when the boat was measured. He was there when the inspection took place. There were a few minor deficiencies, as every boat always has, with a latch here or something there. So it was great for him to get that, go through the paperwork, and then go through the process of rectifying everything. And one of the things that was actually interesting is the boat was unique to the Marion Bermuda Race.
It was.
So it had some hurdles that had to be overcome to get accepted into the race. Because when a unique boat like that is designed and built, it doesn't conform to the regular rules the way that they're written. And the committee was fantastic about addressing each one of those issues. Should they make an exception? Should they revisit how the rule is written? Or how should they proceed with that? And I found that to be kind of groundbreaking for the sport, for the actual race, and actually the perception on how the future of sailing should be. For example, one of the things was emergency steering. So our boat in particular had twin rudders, but it had actually 2 independent steering systems that were tied across. So it wasn't one steering system that controlled both rudders, so if the steering failed, your rudders would fail. This was one wheel control, one rudder, one wheel control the other rudder. So you could have anything that would break in the system, and you would still have steering.
Wow.
So it was something that was addressed of, in fact, without carrying any other sort of emergency steering, I already had emergency steering. And that was something that had never been viewed in that way before. So a lot of boats with twin wheels, they're not always designed that way. Right. But because this boat was going around the world, they had already thought all these things through. Yeah. So there wasn't, in a lot of cases, there wasn't duplication. There was a lot of triple and quadruple backup systems because, as you know, when you sail around the world, you don't get any help anywhere along the way.
Right.
So the boat was more than qualified to be able to go to Bermuda, and it was nice to be able to work through that process.
when the Marion Bermuda Race looks at the boats through inspections and so on, you'll always find something that's a little outside the box that's been written. Kiwi Spirit was a perfect example of a modern cruising boat that had some things that the rules didn't apply. And but if you looked at it from a cruising standpoint, which is what the race is, cruising boats, they were what cruisers were going to have. Okay, that boat was just a little bit ahead of the curve, and the committee recognized that and said, let's make it happen. Let's do it. I mean, we've even talked about foiling. Foiling's coming. Okay, we just don't know when it's coming. So, but you mentioned that Joe actually was skipper.
Yes.
Of the boat. Don't I remember that your daughter actually skippered in
No,
a race too?
that was for the Marblehead Halifax
Marblehead
race.
Halifax. Yeah.
So 2 weeks after that, we did Marblehead Halifax, and in that race in particular, my daughter was skipper, and she didn't have a lot of experience with that level of being involved, but I wanted to push that on her to have her take that level of responsibility. And in that race, actually, my son, who was the skipper in the Bermuda race, was actually the navigator going to Halifax. And in fact, I gave him zero input on navigation, unless he asked me, until we got to the channel of trying to get into Halifax Harbor, when the wind died and the current took over, and then we had to be worried about ships and were we going to come in with the tide or go out with the tide. But until then, he made all the decisions, and everywhere we went is where he wanted to go.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was your job on the boat?
On the way to Bermuda, because we had a lot of family that weren't necessarily good sailors, we had 3 people that had never been on a boat overnight before. We had 1 person that had never been on a sailboat bigger than a sunfish. So
That's gutsy.
my job, along with my son in particular, and 1 or 2 others, was really to sail the boat. And to keep everybody else included as much as possible. We gave everybody the opportunity to drive. We tried to include everybody in what was happening with sail trim, anybody who was interested in finding out where we were going, what the current was doing, where we were going to cross the Gulf Stream. Everybody was involved in learning about that. But when you take people that have a desk job, they learn it enough to understand it, to be involved in it. And there was a great sense of pride by everybody on the boat when we got there, that everybody contributed and everybody played a big role in that.
So it sounds as though you didn't really define the responsibilities by individual. You really gave everyone an opportunity to move around the boat and do different
Yes,
things.
I knew that we had all the bases covered so that we could get the boat there. And quite honestly, we also had one other person. We had the one non-family member was the person at the time who was running the Mass Maritime program, Chuck Fontaine.
Oh, sure.
So we knew that between Chuck, myself, and my son, we could sail the boat if we needed to. So it was really more for us is to bring the family on board and let them experience what my son and daughter and I have experienced with sailing so that they could be a part of it. And they were amazed at some of the things that had to happen in that particular year. It was very windy at the start.
Yes, it was.
And we have some videos that is just shocking to people in the family. Even ones that were on the boat, they cannot believe the conditions the day we started and how exciting it was to come across the starting line and reefs and sails and people trying to shorten jibs right before the start. And it was real exciting for them. They didn't realize that's what sailing was. They just thought it was what they see on television.
Yeah, that was a tough start. It blew all the way down to bay that year. 25 plus.
Yes.
So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So what surprised you on this race with the family?
It surprised me that some of the people that didn't feel well. It surprised me some of the people that didn't sleep at all.
Wow.
So excited to be out there, having such a great time. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd be on deck, and somebody who had just gone down at 2 came back up and said, I can't sleep. This is too much fun. This is too exciting. I have to be out here.
Wow.
That sort of stuff was the biggest surprise for us, is how much everybody in the family got out of it was really the biggest takeaway and the biggest surprise. But because I had done a lot of these races before, I also had a little indication on what some of the apprehension might be for some of the people. So we tried to make everything as fun as could be.
Yeah.
And the whole family was involved, to my wife and my other daughter helping prepare the food ahead of time. So
Yeah.
it was a full family event
Yeah.
of everybody participating. But what we did that was really fun is I included my son and my daughter that were on the boat. They were the only two that knew, but we were going to give awards out to everybody after. And when I say awards, we were just going to make stuff up. And, you know, the sleeping trophy goes to, you know, the person that slept the most, and the cook's trophy, and you know, most energetic, and, you know, just everything you can imagine. And we had a crew dinner when we got there, and nobody knew it was coming, but we took out all these little gift certificates that we had bought at Staples or somewhere, and made them all out ahead of time for what they were going to be, and then presented them at dinner. So the extended family and of us, but also of the people on the boat, were all there. So we probably had 30 of us at dinner, and it was just fantastic.
Oh,
we had 3 hours out to dinner, reminiscing about the race and what had gone on, and that was a takeaway that we'll never forget. It was great.
Once you had your wonderful dinner and so on, did other family members come down to join you in Bermuda?
Yes. My mom and stepdad came down.
Nice.
One of my uncles, well, first of all, so it was myself, my son, my daughter, Chuck from Mass Maritime, my two uncles, one of their sons, so my cousin, and one of my wife's cousins from Quebec were on the boat. I think and my sister's significant other.
Yeah.
And
Boy, you had a group.
oh yeah, yeah. So we had a boat full of people, and they came from kind of all directions and multiple generations.
Yeah.
And so my parents came down. One of my uncle's wives came down. A cousin from Quebec, his wife came down with the kids, and his parents also came down. And then another aunt came down. So we had a good group of people that were there.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
It's you know, I can't imagine the coordination of that many people and all family members, you know, to get that done. But you must have had a lot of enthusiastic people.
Yeah, we did. When we put it out there, we just basically said, you know, this is what we're intending to do. Who wants to come?
Yeah.
And fortunately, the boat was big enough that we could have gone with, you know, maybe as few as 7 or 8. We could have gone with as many as 12. So that was kind of where it landed.
Sure.
Was at that number. I think it was 10, and it was a perfect number to have on the boat.
Wow.
But you were talking earlier about you know, cruising boats and how they're designed. You know, the boat was originally designed to go around the world, so for a lot of people it looks pretty racy. But I can guarantee you that we had air conditioning going in every cabin when we needed it. We had heat going in every place when we needed it, and we ate ice cream on every single watch, off watch, whatever it was. So at the time, although the outside of the boat might have been designed in a particular way, the inside of the boat was, I would venture to say, we were by far the most comfortable people that were in the race.
You were more comfortable than I was.
Yes, yes. Our biggest worry was, don't sit down on the leather seats with your wet foul weather gear on. You know, put something down first was our biggest concern.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Fresh bread every night for dinner. You know, you name it. We had it all.
Did any of the kids that went? Now I know your son and daughter sailed, but any of the other kids on board have they continued to sail? Have they done other races? You know, did this stimulate them to get more into the sport?
No, they're all pretty entrenched in the business community. So
Okay.
so for them, it really wasn't a sailing event. It really more was a family trip to be able to go on.
Okay.
And but it's not easy. It's not like going to Disneyland. So you know, everybody had to earn this one. So even the people that were from the business world, they realized. I can say that my sister's significant other works in the sales field in the pharmaceutical industry. And he actually called me up and asked if I would go in and talk to his team about, you know, how you team build and how you put everything together. And over the course of the summer of telling the story so many times himself, that he felt he was then qualified to give the sailing speech. And he was the one who had never been on a boat bigger than a Sunfish before. And he sat down there and basically told his team what it takes to be an ocean racer. So he felt that comfortable with how much he had learned and how he could equate that to his day-to-day life, that he just gave a spin on that motivation to keep his team going. So,
Well, as you know, 4 days in the open ocean racing to an island, you learn a heck of a lot.
yeah, yeah, you become very comfortable in a very short amount of time when you live it.
Yeah, yeah, you sure do.
Yeah.
So, how did you prepare this group? I mean, you just didn't come down to the harbor one day and jump on board. What did you do?
With some of them, we did.
Really?
Yes. Well, my cousin, who had actually, when I was in college, my cousin helped me take a boat up to Maine to deliver. But besides that, he's gone out deep sea fishing. So he's been on some big boats, but never a sailor other than sailing with me a half dozen times in his life.
Yeah.
He flew in from Chicago the night before, and he got on the boat, and he was the one who barely slept. He was having so much fun the entire time. He just couldn't get enough. Anytime you came on deck, you knew he was somewhere on deck.
Wow.
Yeah, and
No
usually
kidding.
somewhere in the back, bright-eyed, just taking it all in. Whether it was the stars at night, whether it was the sunset, whether it was the flying fish jumping, whatever it was, it just most of the family was just at awe of, especially, as you know, if you take a non-sailor out on the boat, their first night, part of what goes through the head is, I got to do this for 3 or 4 more days. And
Right.
some people get excited about that. Other people, it's like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
And we did have one on the boat that wasn't feeling well for an extensive amount of time. And,
Yeah.
we clipped him on and we found him a nice seat that he could be comfortable with I don't think he moved for 3 days.
Wow.
But when we got to Bermuda and asked him if he'd do it again, he said, absolutely, especially if the same group was here. I would absolutely do it again.
Wow.
And it wasn't a great trip for him, but he would do it again. Because it was
Seasickness is pretty horrible.
and he never got sick, but he felt bad enough that he thought he was going to get sick, that, there's different levels of seasickness for people. And he just kind of shut down and just went into his own little, put his earbuds in and listened to some music and tried to forget where he was for as long as he could. But it's funny, as when you've seen those people before, the story's also a little different when they get to shore, right? And the picture that he portrays today of that trip was glorious.
Yeah. I made it.
Yeah, no, well, he doesn't say I made it. He says I did it.
I did it,
And this
okay.
is what we all accomplished, and
Yeah.
and that's really what the fun is. You don't
Yeah.
when you do a trip like that, especially with family, you don't remember any of the lows. You might be able to laugh about it in private, but
Yeah.
for the most part, everybody remembers all the highs and the memories that you take
Sure.
away, and things that you just remember forever.
Yeah.
One thing that we had happen, we were sailing along, and it's been a little while now, so I don't remember exactly what happened, but my son had to go aloft in the Happy Valley south of the Gulf Stream, and we had I got to remember now what we even had for sails on the boat. I guess we had the spinnaker up, and he had to go up and check something or do something, and as he went by the attachment at the head of the sail, it fell and came crashing down on the deck. And when that happens, you just have to deal with the sail first. So we just tied him off and left him up there. And here he is, our most experienced crew. And he's getting tossed around at the top of the mast. And I'm screaming and yelling at him to hang on and to do what he needs to do so we can do what we have to do. And afterwards, I had one family member and said, did you really have to yell at him like that? And when my son came down, he said, I'm glad that you yelled at me like that because I could barely hear you.
I was going to say, you probably couldn't hear you anyway.
So
Right.
there's that part that we had to work through with other people afterwards. When I was yelling at him, I wasn't mad. I was yelling at him so he'd hear me.
Right.
And it was 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of pretty chaotic stuff. But it was also a very valuable lesson that he learned from it too, because we actually had a conversation before the sail went up and said, should you tape that top of that halyard before it goes up? And the boat was newer to us, and it was a new mechanism that attaches it. And he felt comfortable with it. I felt pretty good with it, so I didn't push it. And when he got down after fixing everything, he looked at me a little dizzy from being up there for a while, and he says, you know what? I should have taped that.
Oh, well, that's learning.
And nothing broke, and everybody came through it okay. But
Yeah.
but it was, as you know, when those kind of things happen, it gets pretty chaotic for a few minutes.
It does.
And everything worked out well.
Wow.
Good learning experience for everybody.
Was that the worst thing that happened?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The only other thing that was a little bit difficult on the boat, because the boat was a twin rudder, the sargasso weed was really, really bad. We really struggled with that a lot.
Yeah.
So we had to actually stop about every 2 or 3 hours. We had to go head to wind and get the boat to back down on its own to throw the Sargasso off of the rudders. Because a traditional boat with a single keel, all that seaweed gets pushed out of the way before it gets to the rudder. On the twin rudder boat, it's coming right down underneath the hull, right onto the rudders.
Oh,
So-
interesting.
Yeah. So that would probably be something that needs to change in either the design to have some deflectors right in front of it,
Yeah.
or some sort of mechanism to be able to clean those without having to stop and slow down.
Wow.
But as everybody's talking about, the Sargasso out there is getting pretty extensive. So I think it affected everybody to a certain extent. It
Yeah.
affected us a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you would do it again, what would you do differently?
Probably just know the boat a little bit better, rating wise. We really didn't know the exact numbers on the boat on how we should push the boat with either which sails we should have up or where leads should be led.
Did you have polars?
We did, but the polars were designed for the boat before it had the interior in it, before it had all the extra weight added to it, and some of those sort of things. So knowing the boat better, I think we probably would have done a little bit better with it. And actually, you said what's the worst thing that happened. Actually, probably the worst thing that happened to us is we started the race with a staysail up and a reef in the main. And as we got up towards Cutty Hunk, the wind eased a little bit. And we took the reef out, and we blew the clew out of the back of the mainsail.
Wow.
And it was the original to the boat.
Okay.
And the sail had some repairs to it, but it just ripped it right out of the sail. It was just the threads had gone, and we'd had the sail inspected, but so we ended up sailing the rest of the way to Bermuda with a reef in, and it wasn't overly windy for most of the race.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest thing. Although we finished first, we did not correct out well,
Right.
and had we not had that mishap on the first day, we would have corrected out much better than what we were.
Well, you still got there first.
Yes. And I
With
will
all of that.
And I will say, for a lot of people, if you had that happen before you got to Cutty Hunk, a lot of people would have said, "Do we really want to keep going?"
Yeah, that's true.
And that never came up.
Wow.
That wasn't an option for everybody because we weren't going to win.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody does any of these races because they're thinking and they're going because they want to win, then they're in the wrong sport. It's you want to go, you want to do well, you'd like to finish in your slot, you want everybody to enjoy themselves. And you know, and if you can win on top of that, great. But if everybody's safe, everybody has a good time, and you finish, you know, respectably where you should, then that's really what the most fun is, because that's what brings you back over and over again to do it again and again and again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and I always say, you know, it'd be different between a power and a sailboater. A sailboater, it's the journey.
Yes.
And a powerboat is the destination.
Yeah.
But the beauty of going to Bermuda, it's both.
Yes. Yes.
It's a wonderful place to go.
I can remember at 16 years old when I did my first trip to Bermuda. I had never been there before. And I'll never forget it. We arrived at sunrise, and it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen in my life.
Wow.
It was one of my hardest trips I've ever had. And I don't think it's just because it was my first one. It was a tough race.
Yeah.
And I just remember seeing all those pastel houses on the shoreline of Bermuda at sunrise, thinking like, I have arrived in heaven. This place is beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's why it brought me back so many times, because you're right. Halifax race was nice. Halifax is beautiful, but it's cold.
Yeah, and foggy.
Yes, and it's cold. You just cannot beat sailing from New England and ending up in Bermuda. I challenge any race in the United States to say that you can go on a 600-mile race and end up in a place as beautiful as Bermuda, that anywhere else can give you that.
Yeah. Well, you did something a lot of sailors don't do, and a lot of fathers and uncles don't do, and that's to take a family on a journey like that. I applaud you for that. That's an incredible opportunity that you had, and it worked out very well for you on a number of fronts. So good job, and I thank you, and thanks for spending the time today to talk to me about this. I think this is going to be helpful to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Actually, and how you do that, how you put something like that together. It's not easy, and I mean, I know how hard it is just to put a regular crew together.
Yeah.
And so to do it with the family is a pretty difficult.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
I would say that None of us are getting any younger. And I realize now that I can't do some of the things sailing that I used to do.
Yeah.
And you don't get these opportunities another time.
No.
I wouldn't be able to do that with my kids today. They've just gone in different directions. I wouldn't be able to get the family together. People's lives change.
Right.
So I would just encourage anybody and everybody, if you can bring that extra person, that extra family member, even if you don't go in a full family crewed boat, you know, bring some of those family members or bring some of those, you know, good friends with you, even if they're not great sailors. A lot of people start out, that's who they bring on some of the deliveries home. But, you know, if the boat's big enough and you have room for people, you should bring those sort of people because those memories last forever.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
how you finish doesn't last forever. Who you did it with does.
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay.